After a big disaster in Japan, there's a special place with walls where robots teach kids. They call it heaven and think the world outside is scary like hell with monsters. One day, a student named Tokyo gets a message asking, "Do you want to leave the outside?" On the other side of the school walls, a girl named Kiruko and a boy who looks like Tokyo, named Maru, are exploring the damaged land. They're searching for two men shown in a picture and a place called heaven. They meet a lady who lives alone on a farm and gives them food and shelter. But she's getting ready for a possible attack at night while the kids sleep. Inside heaven, life goes on as usual. But outside, Kiruko and Maru hear a strange noise that sounds like a monster. They step out to see what it is, and it turns out to be a bird-like creature called Hiruko. Maru figures out how it attacks, so Kiruko can use her powerful Kiru beam gun to defend themselves. However, the lady who helped them earlier says that Hiruko is her son, and she stops Kiruko from shooting it. Then, out of nowhere, she gets killed. Maru steps in and defeats the Hiruko. After that, they leave the place, and Maru shows Kiruko a syringe and medicine he's supposed to give to someone who looks like him in Tomato Heaven. This makes Kiruko remember that when Mikura was dying, she gave her the gun and told her to take Maru to heaven. So they're following that mission. They arrive at a farming village led by someone named Kusakabe. Strangely, someone there thinks Kiruko is a famous electro kart racer named Kiriko Takehaya. While they're at the farm, Maru sees boxes with the same logo as the one on Kiruko's gun handle. This makes him want to go back to Tokyo. Later, when they're on a ferry, Maru tries to make a move on Kiruko. But she confesses that even though she has a woman's body, her mind feels like a man's. Kiruko shares a story with Maru about what happened 5 years ago. There were two siblings, Haruki and Kiriko Takehaya, living in an orphanage. Kiriko, the older sister, was really good at racing electric karts, and her younger brother Haruki spent time with an older person named Robin, who led a group fighting against man-eaters, scary creatures that eat people. One day during a race, Haruki saw a man-eater on the track and tried to fight it by himself. But he couldn't defeat it, and the man-eater started to hurt him. When Kiriko saw this, she crashed her cart into the man-eater. She managed to save Haruki's upper body from being eaten, but there was a gunshot sound. Later, Haruki woke up in a hospital, but something strange happened. He realized he was in Kiriko's body because the doctors did an operation on them. Months passed, and Kiruko tried to find out what happened, but she couldn't. The orphanage and everyone she knew had disappeared. 4 years later, Kiruko met Maru in Akane. Maru has a hard time accepting this surprising information when suddenly a fish monster with arm-like things attacks the ferry they're on. Meanwhile, back in heaven, Kyuku isn't happy with Kana's drawing of a baby. She says babies should have faces, and she knows because she's seen one before. In heaven, Kyuku brings Tokyo to a room filled with babies and incubators. But these babies are strange. They don't have regular faces. Instead, they have circles on their faces and weird appendages instead of legs. When Tokyo gets close to one of them, an alarm goes off, but they manage to avoid getting caught. The grown-ups in the facility use an AI named Mina to help them control things. They keep a close watch on the kids, even monitoring their romantic feelings for each other. Later, Tokyo visits her friend Tarao, who's very sick. Tarao warns her that the facility is dangerous and tells her to escape. Meanwhile, on the ferry in hell, Kiruko figures out that the fish beast survives by coating itself with water. She tricks it into the boat, and when it gets inside, it dries up and dies because the cardboard boxes remove its watery protection. When they arrive at the port, one of the crew members tells Kiruko that the bird logo belongs to a place called Mitsuba. They follow the clue and find an abandoned building with the Mitsuba logo on it. But something's not quite right because the logo looks different from what they expected. Maru gets into a fight with some tough guys, and he's pretty good at defending himself. Afterward, he tells Kiruko about his life. He was born during the Great Disaster and grew up in an orphanage. But when he was 7, they split up all the kids. He had to survive on the streets and got involved with gangs until he was about 10. That's when Mikura took him in and cared for him. Later, when Kiruko sells some books to buy a map, Maru talks to her about something called the war collapse theory. A passenger from the ferry comes to Maru and Kiruko. He wants protection for himself and something he calls cargo. He needs to get to a doctor at the Immortal Order. This doctor can supposedly make people live forever by putting parts of a man-eater into them. But the flesh he's carrying is all messed up, so Maru and Kiruko decide to go to a place marked on their map that has clean water. Back in heaven, Taro dies because of his sickness. The director is really upset because they couldn't find a cure. They say they have to find one before the day of fate, which is coming up soon. But when they cremate Taro's body, something weird happens. They find a big bug-like thing in the ashes. Maru and Kuruko ask a local girl named Totori for help finding clean water. They leave their stuff with her and go into an underground tunnel. There they get attacked by what they thought was a monster, but it turns out to be a wild bear. Kuruko manages to stop the bear and they figure out what it really is. They end up stuck on top of a concrete pillar, and that's when they realize they need each other to stay safe. Kuruko eventually shoots and kills the bear with her Kira beam gun. Later that night, Kuruko talks to Maru about her suspicions that the people they've met might be trying to take advantage of them. In another room, Totori tries to be intimate with Maru, but when he touches her chest, he feels the heartbeat of a Haruko. Remember, those are the strange creatures. He has to explain the awkward situation to Kuruko. Meanwhile, back in heaven, they tell Tokyo to rest in the infirmary. She has a dream where someone named Azura appears, and her body gets covered in a red blotch. That night, she goes to Kana's room, and they confess their love for each other. Somewhere else, Dr. Sawatari finds proof that Tokyo went into the incubator room by finding a mark from her boot. Haruko wants to contact the Immortal Order, so she makes a sign offering to hunt man-eaters. A doctor tells them to come see him. But instead, they're met by a group called the Livyumen, led by a person named Mizuhashi. These folks are against the Immortal Order's weird experiments that mix human and machine. Maru and Kuruko agreed to a deal to kill a man-eater said to be kept in the Immortal Order building. They go into the basement while the Livyumen people protest outside. But Maru starts thinking they might be getting tricked again. Inside, they find small sleeping Haruko creatures. Maru easily takes care of them, but then Kuruko gets hypnotized by a big one. She starts having scary visions of being overwhelmed and eaten until Maru brings her back to reality by kissing her. After that, a guy with an eye patch named Dr. Yusani shows up. He asks for their help. The Livyumen members hold a demonstration outside the Immortal Order building. However, they withdraw once Mizuhashi falls on her head. As she lies unconscious, the new leader claims she has died and calls for revenge. Inside the building, Dr. Yusami takes Maru and Kuruko to see a young woman with amputated limbs being kept alive by machines named Hashio. He explains that she has a progressive disease which will turn her into a man-eater when she dies, and he asks Maru to kill her before that can happen. Hashio requests to see the sky, so they move her and the apparatus to the balcony where Maru uses his power to take her life. Before she died, Hashio left a final message for Yuzami, which causes him to break down. As the Livyumen enter the building, Yusani's group heads off to find other quarters, but one recognizes Kuruko's photo of Robin as Dr. Inazaki from 2 years ago. As the group leaves, Yusami tenderly holds Hashio's body before he commits suicide. A while back in heaven, there was this being named Azura. He had special powers like healing and floating in the air. Azura came to see Kona and said goodbye, but then it did something really surprising. It ended its own life by hanging itself. Now in hell, Kuruko finds out that Yusami had a button with the bird logo when he died. After a small earthquake, Maru and Kuruko meet a guy named Juchi. He offers to sell them some information. Juchi talks about 3 ideas about how the Great Disaster started: a huge space rock hitting, aliens attacking, or a big war. He also shares his own story about living in a place called a walled town, where he had to work and was treated badly by the women in charge. They even used him for some strange purposes before he managed to escape. Kuruko doesn't really believe his stories. Later on, they figure out they're outside a place called Takahara Academy, and it has the bird logo. When they check out the old building, Haruko finds a document that explains it was a school for kids without parents. Meanwhile, back in heaven, the director drops a major surprise. He tells everyone that Tokyo is pregnant. Maru and Kuruko go with Juchi on a long 5-hour journey to the walled town. They want to see if Juchi's baby is still there. When they get there, it looks empty at first, but it's not. There's a spider-like man-eater that can make everything super cold. Kuruko manages to stop it, and they meet 2 guys who used to be treated badly, just like Juchi. These guys tell Juchi that his child is still alive. Juchi has a really happy reunion with his son, Jugo. After that, Kuruko plans to go to the Takahara Academy place in Ibaraki. At night, they get attacked again by the man-eater. But Maru figures out that it's actually Jugo, and he doesn't even know he has these strange abilities. Juchi decides to stay with the other guys and take care of Jugo. He gives Maru and Kiruko his van. Later on, Juchi does something really harsh. He kills a man who alerted others when he escaped from the walled town. Meanwhile, back in heaven, more kids arrive at the facility. In heaven, Tokyo becomes a mother and the director talks with Sawatari about the possibility that the child of Tokyo and someone else might be able to resist the disease that usually affects all the kids created by Mina. The director is pretty old, in her 80s, so she plans to have her brain put into the younger deputy director, Aoshima, to continue her plans. Meanwhile, in hell, Maru and Kiruko keep going in Juchi's van. At night, they notice some smoke far away and decide to check it out the next day. Back in heaven, a girl named Mimihime makes friends with a lonely girl named Oma. But when Mimihime takes off Oma's sunglasses, something really scary happens. She has a terrible nightmare. Later, all the kids are gathered together, and they're told they have to take a test. It's a test where they have to reach the outside of the outside, and they have to play the role of Haruko. In heaven, the day of the test arrives, but something terrible happens. There's an explosion that breaks their peaceful life. The outer wall is broken, and the kids get their first glimpse of the outside world. Inside the nursery, Sawatari gets confused and can't figure out which baby belongs to Tokyo. Meanwhile, in hell, Maru and Kiruko find a busy marketplace. But they discover that people use something called chips as money. They go to the Ministry of Reconstruction to get registered and get some of these chips. There, Kiruko finds out that Robin is around. She gets an appointment to meet him later at the large filtration plant, which used to be the Takahara Academy Ibaraki facility. When it's time to meet, Kiruko goes there by herself. She tells Robin that she's actually Haruki in Kiriko's body, and this makes Robin wonder if Sakota did the operation. But after talking to Kiruko and encouraging her to take a bath, Robin handcuffs her and things take a different turn. Taka and Anzu keep exploring the outside world, while Mimihime and Shiro decide to go back to heaven to tell everyone what they've discovered. In heaven, Sawatari gives a baby to Aoshima, claiming it's Tokyo's. Aoshima then talks about something called the Noah Project to save the children. Later, when Sawatari meets with Tokyo, the director, who's seriously hurt, shows up and tries to take the baby away. This makes Tokyo use her power. Meanwhile, in hell, after 2 days, Maru decides to look for Kiruko. The guards mention Robin and his ex-girlfriend's activities, so Maru fights his way into the filtration plant. There, he finds Kiruko tied up and undressed. Maru confronts and attacks Robin, but Kiruko stops him from killing Robin, and they leave together. Kiruko is really confused and sad after what happened to her, but Maru confesses his feelings again and promises to protect her. Kiruko tears up a photo of Robin before they drive off to keep searching for heaven. Somewhere else, Mimihime, Shiro, Taka, and Anzu are seen on a speedboat heading towards a brightly lit city. Subscribe for more videos like this. Thanks for watching.